Alec, yep. And Alex had even improves even more. 24 now bets, 28 bets about 75% of the pot. He's trying to put the piles in there.
You know what I mean? Like, I think for him, it's just a digital world where...
And it looks like David's going to raise.
Wow.
Like when you're on live stream.
Yeah, I expect 61.
Almost a min raise. So David is repping a straight here, guys. He's repping the Jack 9.
We often see this with recreational players when they do a min raise. It's often a medium strength hand. It's often like a stop bet. They want you to stop betting. They want to find out where they're at, quote unquote. So I think Alex is going to have a very good idea where he is in this hand. I don't think it's going to change his action. I think he's always going to call.
I wouldn't be surprised if he just like puts the money in here, though.
You think?
Like it depends what he perceives this turn min raise to be.
Hand of the day.
What's up, guys? It's Alec Torelli, and welcome back to an episode of the Hand of the Day. Today's hand comes from a high-stakes cash game I played on Live at the Bike. Awesome game, 50-100, and had an amazing experience there in February. Absolutely loved playing on that game. They did an excellent job. But this hand is one of the last sessions I played. I start with 20,000 in the hand. I open under the gun to 350, two blind game. So I'm going to be opening with less hands in a 9-handed cash game. So I guess you could opt for a little bit bigger of a sizing, which is sometimes why I go 3x, 3.5x, or 4x in early position, just because my hand range is so much stronger. So it makes sense to open a little bit bigger and apply more pressure. So I guess that's sort of not too much to read into. But anyway, I opened to 350. David calls in mid position with ace queen off. Totally fine. Harry calls in the small blind with ace 9 of diamonds. You could argue to 3-bet that hand, but I don't mind calling at all either. Against an under-the-gun open in a 9-handed cash game, it's definitely fine to see a flop, and a lot should depend. I'm not going to say what he should do in this spot or whatever, because it's not as relevant as analyzing the hand from what your objectives are in the game that you play. So depending on who's in the pot and who you want to play the pot against, that should sort of dictate how you should play these borderline situations, right? If you want to 3-bet to isolate someone, fine. If you want to call to play a pot against someone else, that's also fine. These borderline hands could go either way. Ace 9, definitely fine to call. Andy calls with two. He doesn't have two random cards. We just can't see his cards in the big blind, and we go 4 ways to the flop. So the flop comes gin for me, right? Queen 10-4, and Harry checks, Andy checks, and it's on me. Pot's 1,400, and I have a pretty clear bet here, I think. But I think that you could argue to maybe check this flop if there were 2 or 3 people behind you and there was only one person in front of you, right? So if there's the big blind in the hand and there were like 3 people behind you, like mid-position, hijack button, maybe you could check this hand for balance, to get a little bit tricky and sort of to regain position in the hand and see what happens. If the guy to your immediate left bets, a few other people act, you sort of get to see what everybody else does and then determine how do you play your hand. Do you want to trap and slow play? Do you want to check raise? Depending on who calls, how they call, how they bet, what sort of reads you get, you can make a more effective decision with your hand. Obviously, betting is totally fine. I just want to give you another option for how you could go about playing this hand in a different scenario. Anyway, I decided to bet. My sizing is definitely going to be a little bit bigger. Simply because I'm betting into 4 people and I'm repping a pretty damn strong range, right? Like I'm betting into 4 people on this board. The hands that I'm betting for value are something like King Queen plus, Queen Jack maybe. So other than that, Queen 10 is 2 pair, King Queen, Ace Queen are strong hands. Set of 10s, set of queens, kings or aces. Those are the strong hands I'm repping, and I'm not repping that many bluffs, right? I'm going to have something like maybe King Jack suited, Ace Jack, Ace King. Those are really my bluffs. And so betting big is pretty reasonable with those hands because your bluffs are going to have a decent amount of equity and you want to apply a lot of pressure. So I bet 1,000. David calls to my left, which is pretty damn strong, right? He calls with 2 people behind him. So that's, pretty damn strong hand. It's very likely he has like a strong queen. Really good spot for me because I have that hand in very, very bad shape. So Harry folds, Andy folds, and David and I go heads up to the turn where things get interesting. Turn comes in 8 of clubs. I pick up more equity, an amazing card for me. Of course, Jack 9 got there, but at the same time, excellent turn card for my hand. He's definitely going to be continuing with all his queens, and a lot of his 10s maybe picked up more equity. If he has something like Jack 10 or 10 9, of course 10 8 made 2 pair, and which I have that dead, but the 10s picked up more equity as well if he has those hands. So this is a great turn for me, needless to say. And I decided to bet pretty big here. If I'm bluffing, I'm going to be wanting my opponent to fold a strong hand like a queen, and so I got to bet using a bigger sizing, right? I also don't have like a ton of bluffs here, betting into 4 people on this board, so I definitely want to be betting bigger. I decided to pot it and bet 3,300 just because I think in this spot my opponent's not going to fold a queen. If he has it, he's going to call at least once more. Queen Jack picked up more equity as well, so there's definitely some hands that he called the flop with that are more encouraged to call the turn as well. And the flush draw out there definitely looks like I could be barreling with any sort of backdoor club combo, or just continuing with something like ace jack that picked up more equity. So I'm going to be betting. I want to bet big, and I basically want to set it up to be able to bet 3,300 on the turn, which is what I end up betting, and something like 10,000 on the river and just bombing it. Oh no, I bet 2,800, close to the size of the pot, like 5/6 the pot. Now here's where things get interesting. Mr. David takes an unconventional line, and you can see here he's sort of thinking about what to do. He's like kind of like counting out chips, whatever, and he throws a 5K in there. I mean, some of the things are lost here in translation because the camera angle cuts back and forth, but he ends up raising me to 6,100. Now this is a really weird spot for me because I know what I'm supposed to do in a spot like this, and this is sort of where I was unsure about what my opponent's exact range is in this spot, and I'm also unsure about how he's going to react on the river. And in a spot like this, when you don't know what to do, using theory is definitely a reasonable approach, right? So you're going to have to think about not exactly what you want to accomplish in this hand, but what all of your hands are going to be doing in a spot like this. So most of the time in this spot, I'm going to just be calling. I don't really have that many hands that I'm shoving with, just because if my opponent is raising me with 2 pair or a set or a straight, it's really hard for me to shove with something like kings. Even though there are a lot of draws out there, sure, the times that I'm behind, I'm drawing pretty much dead. So most of my hands, like my 1 pair hands, aren't going to shove here. And my draws, like ace jack, king jack, clubs, if I have that, have so much incentive to call because I'm calling 3,300 to win 12,000. So I have so much incentive to call with all my draws. And also he's repping a pretty big hand, so it's pretty risky to shove, 15,000 when all those strong hands that he's repping are going to snap call me. Now, in this particular spot, there's really not that many bad rivers that hurt me. The problem is that if he's so theory says, theory is definitely reasonable to call here, right? This is like, calling for balance is definitely reasonable. I also don't know what my opponent exactly is doing. I don't know if he's bluffing. And so calling definitely is like a reasonable option. But in this spot, one, I feel like I should have been able to sniff out that he was trying to raise to get to showdown. This is sort of a small raise, and it definitely could be one of those raise where he's like sort of finding out where he's at, right? Sort of like an information raise, maybe a value raise. Maybe he just doesn't want to face a big bet on the river. Maybe he wants to put in more money with a worse draw, something like ace jack, and just take the lead away. I feel like I should have been able to sniff that out in a live setting like this, and I'm a little bit frustrated that I didn't. So I'm a little bit frustrated that I didn't be able to make a higher level play here and shove, realizing that he's probably somewhere in this middle of the pack type of hand with something like ace queen or king queen, doesn't really know what to do, and those hands are all going to check the river. So the problem with calling here is if your opponent has something like queen jack or 10 jack or ace queen or whatever, a hand that just wants a cheap showdown, doesn't really know what to do, those hands are all going to check the river. The other problem is that if he has a draw, he's also probably going to play perfectly against me on the river because if the river blanks, he's probably not going to bet. And it's really hard for him to have clubs because I have queen 10 of clubs, so he can't really have a pair and a flush draw. So it's really awkward to have the exact hand that I have here. And I feel like I definitely could have made a case for shoving just because of where I felt like he was at in the hand. So I think I think I sort of talked myself into taking a balanced approach on the turn, when in reality I should have been a little bit more exploitative. figured out where a little bit better of where my opponent was at, what the likely hands he had were, and then how he was going to react on the river. The problem with calling here, if you think your opponent has these like weak sort of showdown value hands, is he's not going to bet unless he improves. So David's not going to bet the river unless it's a queen or an ace, because when I bet call this turn, I either have a huge draw or an overpair or something like that, and it's really hard for him to think he's going to get value from worse with ace queen. He's probably thinking, oh shit, I might be beat, or this guy's only going to call me with a better hand. So I feel like I should have been able to sift that out and jam the turn here. Also because it's really hard for him to fold, right? Like maybe he thinks I'm bluffing. He's going to be getting a decent price. And let's face it, if he did raise this turn, it's sort of hard to raise fold this turn with something like ace queen. It's a pretty strong hand. So I think I might have been able to get all the money in here instead. The other side of the coin is like if I'm beat, right? If he has something like a set or jack 9, I'm going broke regardless, right? If the river comes a deuce of diamonds, I'm check calling all in if he shoves, no matter what. I'm never going to fold this hand. It's just simply too strong. So if he does have like a worse two pair, if he has something like 10-8 or queen-8 or something like that, the problem is there's a lot of rivers that sort of counterfeit his value bets, right? If the river comes a jack, river comes even maybe a king, he might check 10-8, maybe. If the river comes a 9, if the river comes a club, if the river comes an ace, all those hands are going to counterfeit his like sort of weak value hands, like something like a 10-8 for two pair, which does make a little bit of sense. Something like 10-8 does make a lot of sense, even though there's not that many combos of it. So that's sort of the case for shoving. I think in this spot, I feel like I should have shoved. Calling is definitely a reasonable long-term play, but I feel like I should have been able to sniff it out. Anyway, I decided to call. This is really an interesting point of the hand. The river comes offsuit 7, and here I just sort of like auto-checked, but I definitely could have made a case for betting as well. Given a lot of my logic on the turn, it's like I don't want to let him have a cheap showdown with these weak sort of one-pair hands. Also, all the draws missed, right? So if I have something like ace-jack I missed, I might turn it into a bluff. Now, the question is like, is he going to bluff here? Is it worth checking to get him to bluff or to value bet worse? Well, it's really unlikely he's going to value bet worse. I mean, he ended up checking ace queen in this hand, so if he's checking this, he's pretty much never value betting worse unless he has 10-8. But 10-8 is going to call if I bet, so I win the same amount of money from 10-8 regardless. Now, the real question I have to ask myself is he going to bluff? Well, I mean, what bluffs does he have? I guess he could have something like king jack and turn it into a bluff, or 8-9 and turn it into a bluff, but it's really unlikely he's going to bet that river. I mean, those hands have some showdown value. I'm going to have some ace jacks or king jacks that might call this turn, or I'm going to have some backdoor clubs. So his hands that have like pairs in them all have too much showdown value to bluff. It's really unlikely he's going to bluff after I called this turn, simply because I'm also going to have a lot of overpairs or strong one pairs in my range as well. So I really don't think he's going to bluff this turn. I don't think he's going to value bet light. I could have made a case for jamming the turn, but I could also make a case for doing something really weird and like stop and going this play, calling the turn. The pot's 15,600. I could just make a case for calling and then jamming the river or betting 9,000 on the river. He's gonna have a real tough time folding these types of information raises that he made on the turn. He's gonna have a really tough time folding something like ace queen. So I'm a little bit pissed that I played this hand pretty damn weak. I ended up calling the turn number 1. I let him get away, and then I checked the river number 2 like a jackass, and of course he checks right behind with ace queen. And I can't help but feel like I missed a little bit of value. So anyway, that's my hand. I talked myself into this theory nonsense that I always tell you guys that's stupid. You should just play exploitative poker. I'm just harping on this theory shit. Anyway, I talked myself into calling on this turn, and it cost me. So anyway, I'd like to hear you guys make fun of me in the comments. Let me know what you think. You're totally allowed free reign to blast me for not winning the most amount of money. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave them in a comment below. Subscribe to my channel, like it, give it a thumbs up. I love you guys. You're awesome. Cheers on the hand of the day.